And I'll click record. And we can begin. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you are in the UK, and welcome to Remolody Reports. This is Newsbreak 57, and I'm here this morning with John Smith, who first convened the Common Law Court in the UK in 2017, and is here to speak about common law remedy, which is a way to provide lawful remedy for those who have been suffering inside the current judicial system. So we are here to do a little update on what's happening with Lynda and David Noakes. And I'm so happy to welcome you to the show this morning. John, thank you for being here.
Okay. Hello, thank you for the opportunity to come on, and hello to all your viewers.
Absolutely. Many people are, of course, very interested in common law these days. And it sounds like, from what I understand of the situation with David Noakes and Lynda, that actions you have taken through the common law court are actually impactful and significant. They're not just empty actions. Something can actually be achieved with the common law court.
Yes. I think the difficulty David and Lynn had initially is that they were being prosecuted within the existing system. And when they're prosecuted within the existing system, they're being prosecuted with the use of the legal fiction. Now, for
Right.
your viewers or listeners who may not know about this, the legal fiction is something that was created at birth. It was created by the government with a birth certificate, and it's attached to every individual. From day one, when you're born, the government, when they deal with you, they only deal with the legal fiction. They use it for various things, but there's not an actual record of you living as a living woman or a living man. There's no record exists within the world. If you have any identification, it's normally a birth certificate, a driving license, an insurance card. It could be any sort of passport, any documents. They're all government issued documents, and the name on the documents is the legal fiction, but it's not relevant to you as a living man or a living woman. And what they do is they use the rules and something called criminal coercion within the courts to get you to accept the legal fiction. So effectively, they're taking a fiction, attaching it to the living man or woman, and saying, we're going to use that to attack you and punish you. And if you accept the legal fiction, which many people do, not knowing the difference, they are then obviously bound by the statutory rules and punished accordingly. Now, this is what happened with David and Lynn. So we've actually found out a way to address this and protect them.
I see. This notion of criminal coercion is quite astonishing. I had no idea is that a legal term for what they are doing?
Yes, yes. Every court, it's not only in the UK, it's throughout the world. Every court in the world uses a criminal fiction, a criminal coercion, sorry, by using the legal fiction to simplify it. Many people will of a certain age may remember a television series in the 70s called Roots. Now, Roots was actually quite good. It was actually about slavery in America.
Oh, yes.
It was really good. Now, what had actually happened, the main character, I believe, was called Kunda Kinte, but that was his tribal name. Now, what happened is when he was sold off to a slave owner, the slave owner told him that he had a new name, and his name was to be Toby. Now, the slave didn't accept the name and says, no, my name is Kunda Kinte. Now, what happened then is he was whipped and beaten to within an inch of his life. And eventually, the slave had to turn around and accept the name given by the slave owner, which was Toby. So when
Oh,
he accepted that, that is criminal coercion. He's actually being forced to accept another name, which is not his own name. And by doing so, the slave owner has control and he can do what he wants. Now, uh, slavery was supposed to be abolished hundreds of years ago. William Wilberforce in the UK played a large part in that. It was quite good, it was great. However, what they actually did is they actually hid the slavery issue, because what they did is they turned around and admitted that slavery was actually unlawful. So they brought about change and says because it was unlawful, they were then going to change it. So they changed the system. Now everyone then believed that you're no longer slaves, but what they did is they legalized slavery, and they didn't tell you.
This
They actually
happened in
created.
1863 or
Oh,
sometime
yeah,
around
it's
that
a
time.
couple of 100 years ago. It's when the slavery was abolished years ago.
Yeah, I'm
What they've
trying to remember
actually
the
done,
exact dates,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
I know.
around that
What they
time.
actually do with this is they turn around and say that slavery is unacceptable, as the United Nations state as well. Slavery in all forms is unacceptable.
Hmm.
Now, basically, says what they've done is said we no longer accept that because it's unlawful. But what they do is they actually give you a legal fiction, and they state to you that this is your legal fiction, this is your name, and they tell you from birth that this is your identity. You then accept it, not knowing that you're actually complying or giving consent to a contract with the government. And that means that you are then bound by their rules because you've accepted this fiction. When you go to court, you have to identify yourself with a title name. So they address you and say, in my case, are you Mr. John Smith? So they do that. Now, if I accept the Mr., that then gives them full control and authority over me.
Oh, even the
If
Mr.
you,
part of it.
yes, the Mr.
Oh,
is that distinguishes you because it gives you the legal title, and that's the corporation. This is the corporation. It's a registered business. It's basically it's a piece of paper that
right.
exists. It's not actually real. It says you have as a as myself. It says before this common law court was set up, the only record of my existence was with the statutory information, birth certificate,
The
driving
birth
license, passport,
certificate.
and so on. Yes.
Oh, that's true.
Now,
All of those, the birth
yeah, all of
certificate, the
all the
driver's
documents.
license.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all the documents you have. If you have health insurance, if you have, you go to the doctor's surgery, housing, mortgages, everything you have, a bank card, that's all the legal fiction. So effectively, although we are chatting just now, if I
Hmm.
was to come off after this show and go and tell one of my neighbours or friends that I was on here a show and I was speaking to yourself, if they didn't know you, they would ask me to prove who you are. Say, well, who was that? I can't actually confirm you exist because there is not a record in the world that says that you exist as a living woman, because the only record of you is as a legal fiction, which is a corporation, is not a living woman.
I see. So there's no
Yeah.
record in the world that I exist
Well,
because my name has been corporatized
yes,
as the
yes.
old cap name.
Yeah, well, the only way the common law court actually was, believe it or not, it was through a Canadian. Many people would do things, and obviously the common law court is simply lawful. It's a process that provides a lawful remedy for those who need to are being targeted by the judicial system, so they can use this and rely on this and defend themselves. Now, many people had brought up the issue of the fiction and the living man, and there's a gentleman in Canada who turned around and said, "Look, we need a recorded system here for living men and women because it doesn't exist." So we have actually set up with the common law court a process whereby people can actually submit a declaration of their birth. So you can actually go and confirm that you were born as a living woman. You give your name, you give your details, when you were born, your parents' details, and that's it. Now you're given an automatic reference number. There's no charge for this. You're given a reference number, and then that has logged you as a living woman. So there now is factual evidence that you exist as a living woman. Up until then, there's none. Now, when you use this information and you go into a statutory court, one of their courts, we have actually presented this information and a certificate from the common law court to a judge, and the
Mhm.
judge confirmed in the court that he has no authority over us because we are living men and living women.
The judge
If you
confirmed
distinguish,
that for you?
yes, yes,
How
confirm
how
that.
did the judge confirm that?
Well, the judge had wanted to, we had stated that the judge had no authority and jurisdiction in the court. The judge turned around and said, yes, I have. This is my court. I have authority and jurisdiction and will proceed with the case. Now, what we had done is prior to going into the court a few days before, we had actually presented a common law birth certificate from the common law court. We submitted that as evidence pre-trial. Now, that went into the bundle of papers. And when we went in, the judge had made his stance. We turned around and says, well, no, if you look at the court papers you have in front of you, we have given you a common law birth certificate. Now, the common law birth certificate is confirmation that you exist as a living man or
Oh, I
woman.
see.
And then when you do that, they cannot challenge it because the common law certificate is issued with the authority of the people. So if they try to challenge that document, what they're actually doing is challenging the authority of the people. Now, the judges don't have authority over the people. So when we produce that, the judges says, right, okay, fine, yes, okay, I will accept. I do not have personal jurisdiction over you.
That's
However,
huge.
I'm going, yeah, he says, however, I'm going to proceed. Now, he was going to proceed because he was going to deal with the legal fiction.
I see.
So he
He
was
was
going to
going
deal
to
with it.
try to sort of
Yeah,
yank you back into that
yeah.
fiction world, the
he
legal
was he
fiction.
was going to get away from the living man and say, well, that's fine. I can't deal with you, so I'm not going to speak to you. I'll now deal with the legal fiction. But we got around that because we also produced a certificate of ownership for the legal fiction, and that was in the court bundle. So we says, well, if you're going to deal with the legal fiction, if you look at the court bundle in front of you, we've submitted ownership papers to confirm that we own the legal fiction, and therefore, because we own it, we do not consent to this. He says, look, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not dealing with this. This is nonsense. I'll adjourn the hearing. He adjourned it for a couple of weeks, so he couldn't deal with it. Now, we've used this. When I went in for David and Lynn into the court, they won't even speak to me in court. They've actually thrown me out of court. They've actually had security staff escort me out the court. But the one thing is, we have had three, maybe 400 of these documents put into every authority you can think of. So if you think about the police, the courts, now we're speaking about the courts in the UK, but it's went up to every level of court within the UK, throughout the UK, including the Supreme Court. So we've submitted these paperworks. They went to the police, they went to the members of parliament, they went to the cabinet ministers, the prime minister. It's went to solicitors, barristers, councils, local authorities, hospitals, police, you name it. Everyone's got these documents.
Do you mean
Now,
in the
we've had,
case of David Noakes? Is that
so, no, in general, we've
in
actually
general?
submitted this to defend people, and we've put in over 400 documents to various authorities everywhere, and never, ever once has these documents been challenged. Never. No, we're
So
using this for
when you
David
when you
and
say
Lynn.
challenged, they would have to write back and say something, right? They would
Well,
say, is that what you
well,
mean? Is that what you
well,
expect as a challenge?
well, when we actually submit, we confirm the information that we've given. For example, it's a birth certificate or ownership of the fiction, the legal fiction. When we do that, they have not disputed that. They've not challenged the authenticity of the document, and they've accepted them, but they don't want to discuss them. They just play dumb. They don't
Yeah.
speak this.
They
Uh,
don't want to address the issue
oh,
at all. They
oh,
kind
they
of step
can't.
away from the
They
entire
can't
issue.
because it takes away their authority. So they can't get involved with this, which is fine, which is why we're
They
using this for
can't get
David and Lynn.
involved. So you see, this is what it comes down to, it sounds like. They have to sort of admit that you're almost like foreign to them.
Yeah,
They cannot deal with your issues.
no,
So basically,
no,
they cannot prosecute you. They cannot
no.
convict you. They can't drag you into their courts and arrest and extradite you.
Well, there was a hearing in Scotland. It wasn't myself. It was a gentleman I knew in Scotland. Now he had his nephew was removed by the social services incorrectly and should never have been taken away. But as the uncle, he decided to go and fight for the child. Now we went into court over a period of 2 years, and during that time we had to see three different judges. But each judge he went before were committing crimes against him, and the removal of the child was unlawful. So he was aware of the common law court and decided that based on what was happening, he was going to sue uh, these three judges and take them to a common law court to prosecute them. So he decided to put together the case and the papers, and we had to send out a summons to the three judges. But when we sent out a summons for them to attend, they went off their head. They didn't like it, and but they couldn't close the common law court down because effectively they'd be attacking the people. So what they decided to do is say, right, we'll prosecute this one individual because he's signed for this summons. He's issued the summons, but they found out that he didn't actually send the summons. He compiled the paperwork; it was done, but he didn't send it. So they then turned around and decided, well, who sent it? So they happened to get the CCTV footage, and I happened to be in the post office posting documents at the same time.
I see.
So they actually took the documents and they decided they were going to prosecute me. Now, I've never been convicted of a crime in my life. I've never been charged in my life. I've never been in trouble. Now, and they decided that when I went to watch him at his first hearing, because they had actually saw me in the audience, the gallery, the public gallery, they saw me sitting there, they cleared the courtroom. So everyone went outside for 10 minutes. We didn't know why. And within about 5 minutes, I was surrounded by 9 police officers who sort of jumped and, well, handcuffed me and took me away swiftly, threw me into the cells and kept me overnight for 26 hours and took me back into court, and then decided they were going to prosecute me for issuing court orders, summonses against existing judges. So they took me into court for a one-day hearing. They didn't get any joy, so we went back 2 weeks later, and another 2 weeks later, and another 2 weeks later. So there's 4 hearings,
Were
but
you
each time,
imprisoned all that time?
no, I was out on bail
Okay.
between hearings. But when they took me into court, I would not allow them authority or jurisdiction over me. I challenged that from day one, and they didn't like it. So they wanted to carry on with the trial, which they did, and just ignored me. But after the second hearing, because what the judge was doing was criminal, I convened a common law court and had him prosecuted under common law. So we got a jury to give a guilty verdict against him. So I took the guilty verdict and served it on the judge, and I put it in as the court papers. And when I turned up for the next hearing, the next day, 2 weeks later, we started off the hearing, and again, I objected to it, but I said to him, before we proceed, I need you to confirm that you have a copy of a court order against you. At which point he held up in his hand and says, yes, I have it here. I said, well, that being the case, that confirms that you're a convicted criminal. You're not fit to sit on the bench, and I want you removed. He says,
Wow.
well, I won't be doing that. And I said, well, I didn't think so, because you're a criminal. He says, you have the order, you cannot proceed with this, and if you stay, you're committing further crimes. And then he went to go, and I said, before you proceed, in Scotland, we have police officers in court. So we had a couple of police officers. Now, not wanting to put them in a difficult position, I turned around and says, before you proceed here, we have two police officers in court. I do not expect them to do anything, but I'm informing them that you're a convicted criminal. You are committing crimes just now, and that they have and can arrest you for committing crimes just now in court. However, I don't expect them to do so, because they would have to take instructions from a superior officer. Now, if they wish to do so, that's fine. If they wish to arrest you, that's also fine. I don't think they will. He says, I'm not really bothered, because this is recorded on the record. So therefore, if you proceed, you will be committing a criminal crime if you wish to do so. And he says, right, I'll continue. I says, fine. And he just carried on. So he stayed for the third day. He went through the whole day. And at the end of the day, he dismissed the case against me and dropped the charge.
That's really
Now,
interesting.
and that
That
was a
sounds
criminal.
like
Yeah.
it sounds like publicly he didn't want to give an inch, he didn't want to back
Oh,
down from his
no.
stance, but at the end of the day, he dismissed the charges and he
Yeah.
adjourned the hearing
Yeah.
because he
Well,
understood actually that he did have no jurisdiction over you.
yes. Well, this is what we're doing to David and Lynn just
Mhm.
now. The Common Law Court on the 31st of August last year, 2019, we convened a court in Guildford, just outside London. Now,
Okay.
it was to do with David's case, but when we convened that, we were prosecuting two judges. The English judge in David's case, which is Nicholas Lorraine Smith, and the French judge, which is Judge Godoud, Jean-Luc Godoud. So we prosecuted both of them. They were both found guilty of committing crimes against the people, various criminal behaviours, including fraud. And I also asked for an order from the court, the jury, because I believed that the coronation in 1953 for the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, when she was actually being appointed Queen and the coronation went through, there was a major flaw in the coronation. Now, it wasn't conducted correctly, which means effectively that the coronation's void. It means that the Queen was not sworn in correctly. And it also states that because she has signed and given authority to all the courts and the judges, that's now void. So they have no authority and jurisdiction over you. So if you are a living man or a living woman, you can confirm that the statutory courts do not have any authority over you or jurisdiction because of this flaw from 1953, the coronation. Now, that was a court order given by jury, a jury of 12 peers. They give this order, and what we do is we take this information and we put it into the court in the papers, and they cannot challenge it. They're not challenging it. But the thing is, what we need to do now is push further. So, because the orders that were given against, oh,
This is it.
sorry,
I'm just sharing
yeah,
screen because
oh,
this
sorry,
is
it's okay, yeah,
the
yes,
case that you were talking
yeah,
about, right? This is the common law
yes, is
courts
one of them,
page.
yeah. Um, what actually happens when you go down, it gives a brief summary, but when you get to the bottom of the page, there should be a link, and that will give you a copy of the court order. So you can actually do that. Click here, it is. If you click
Okay.
on that, it gives you the court order, and you can read through that. That's it there.
Ah, very
So,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, what happens is the courts that they have operate with authority and jurisdiction, but they actually take it through something that's called the presumptions in law. For example, this is if you respond to a summons and you turn up to court, you're
Mhm.
automatically guilty because you've responded to the
Oh, I
summons.
see. That's right. I've
Yeah,
heard this before that you're not supposed to open their material right when it comes through the mail because once you do that, it's sort of taken that you've accepted
yeah.
their contract
Now
or
they,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
well, they have presumptions in law, which obviously they don't tell anyone about. Now, what we're aware of the presumptions in law. So what we do is we submit the paperwork to say, look, we're aware of these presumptions. We don't accept them. And because we don't accept them, you have no authority and control over us because we've stated that both verbally and writing. So they cannot use those presumptions against you. Now, what we do each court we go into is we say to them, before you proceed, you need to establish authority and jurisdiction, which they can't. It's impossible. So that means it's very difficult, and that's why they won't allow me into court. We've actually put paperwork into court. They've signed for the paperwork, so they've signed it. They've got that. They've even confirmed they have the paperwork, and then they do nothing with it. They just sit there. So they
So
keep
this was
telling you,
sent to them, this particular um,
"Oh yeah,
court
that's just one of the
order
orders."
was
Yes,
sent to them.
we have. I don't know if you can see that here. I've got I've got three documents here. I just pulled out for you. These
Okay.
three documents here, right? Uh, the three documents here. This is approximately about 90 pages each.
Oh, wow,
Now
that's
these documents.
huge.
That's three cases. That's just for David and Lynn. Now David and Lynn had obviously they found out initially they had an extradition warrant issued against them. So we've confirmed that it was issued unlawfully. So we've voided the extradition order. Now, when we voided it, see, within the system, if there is a flaw in the system and there's an error, it's supposed to correct itself. So what they do is they say, if, for example, there is a fundamental defect when
Mm-hmm.
making the ruling, you can void a decision, means set it aside. So that's equivalent of striking it off so it never happened from the beginning, which they call ab initio. So it's not valid. Now, we've actually done that. But the point is, nobody knows about this because in the system, you have very few people that will use it because if a solicitor or a counsel or barrister was to void a decision by a judge, their life would be hell because judges don't like their orders being voided. So very few people will do that, but it is available, but the public don't know about it. So what we've done is we've voided it. But if we void the decision and we, in doing so, we used a statutory argument to confirm our position, they wouldn't accept it and their judges would rule against us. So we don't use that. So what we do is we void it using common law.
I see.
Now,
And
by
it's more
using
powerful
common
that
law,
way. Yeah.
yeah, by using common law, their judges cannot void it because they have no authority over common law. And the reason we can use it and the reason there is a fundamental defect is they're using criminal coercion to attach a legal fiction to you and saying, look, this is your fiction, therefore we're going to prosecute you. Now, they've done that to Lynn, they've done that to David, by saying, here is your fiction, we're going to prosecute you. And then as a living man or woman, they then sentence them, put them in jail and punish them. But they can't do that. And because we've put the paperwork in with the common law court documents, they can't challenge it. We've put in 7 recently over the last few weeks, and every one of them has went before a judge, and they can't do anything with them.
But they
So as
still
a
have Lynda in jail
yeah,
right now.
yes, well, what we're doing now is we have a document just now which has voided the extradition. So that therefore means that Lynn should get out. But the point is, they're ignoring it. Now, the Prime Minister knows about this and the Justice Minister, but they're just plain dumb. They're not speaking about it, they're hoping it will
They're
go away.
playing dumb. They're just
Yeah,
pretending it doesn't exist.
yes.
But
But,
what are the implications of that? Can they do that? Can they get away with
well,
that?
well, first of all, if they do that, there was actually, we submitted some emails over the last week or so to follow up with what we're doing. Now, effectively, what we have in this country is you have a judicial system in the UK which is non-existent. It's not there for justice, it's there for profit in big
Correct.
companies,
Same
right?
here in the
Yeah,
US. You know.
that's it. Well, that being the case, now what we've done is we've hired people, we pay people, obviously the Prime Minister in this country and the politicians, they're appointed with the people, put into place and paid a salary. What they're actually doing now is committing crimes against the people, which effectively is treason or even misprision of treason. They're actually committing crimes against the people. We're living in a police state. Now,
Yes.
instead of correcting the flaw in putting things right, they're just saying, well, okay, we're going to punish you, but in this case, they can't. So they say, well, okay, well, we can't touch you then. Okay, we've got your paperwork. Yes, we've got it, and they acknowledge that. But they say, right, we're not going to do anything about it now, and they just sit there. Now, if it's one case, it's very difficult to do. But unfortunately, within the common law court, we actually have people registering their births or obviously submitting declarations of their birth from 88 countries in the world.
Wow.
People are doing this. We have thousands of people doing it. And because of this procedure with voiding orders, we have many, many people just now in the process of voiding their own orders. Now, when you void orders, it could be for anything. It could be for, obviously, it should be for tax issues, it could be for driving issues, it could be for civil offences, criminal offences, it could be for extradition orders, it could be for property theft, losing houses, mortgages. It could be for things like taxes, council tax, it could be for vaccinations, unlawful vaccinations, things like that. You can use all these documents to void the orders. Now, when we void the orders, the state cannot proceed with what they're doing. Now, if it was one case like David or Lynn, nobody knows about it. But we have thousands of people. Now they're all about to start using these orders. So what's going to happen is all these people are going to be contacting the politicians and our Prime Minister to say that there's a fault here. We've voided these, we want it dealt with now. And they're required to do so. And if they don't, we'll get the message out and we'll have them removed from office because we pay for them. So this is why we do it on a larger scale. So this is actually in the process just now. So in a short period of time, we will actually be able to make inroads. Now, the Prime Minister and the judge concerned, we dealt with in relation to these orders. We had sent the void order in. They actually admitted through the court. Now, within the system over here, you have to submit paperwork on one of their forms. So they
Okay.
have a form, which is numbered form, you have to submit it. If you don't submit the paperwork in one of their forms, they return it straight away and say, we're not accepting it. Even if you do submit the paperwork on the correct form, you then have to pay a fee because it's all about money. If you don't pay the fee, they return your paperwork. And then if you do submit the form and pay the fee, they then look at it and decide whether or not you'll get anywhere. Nine times out of 10, if they're uncomfortable, say it's dismissed, it has no merit, and they'll send it away, so you won't get it. It says it very seldom goes to a judge. Now, because this paperwork is so strong, we've submitted it not on their paperwork, so it's not on the form, and they've accepted it. We didn't pay any fee, and they've accepted it.
Oh,
And we've stuck it into the clerk, and the clerk won't touch it, and immediately passed it up to a judge. The judge has got it, and the judge has had to admit that they have a copy of our orders. They didn't say we've got a copy of the paperwork. They didn't say that we have your documents. They says we are in receipt of your orders. He says, however, we're not going to communicate any further on this matter. And they've just dropped it. So effectively, they're saying, yes, okay, we've got your paperwork, but we don't want to talk to you now. And that's it. So they're trying to play dumb. But unfortunately, within their own procedures, there's I think it's a criminal proceedings or crime proceedings act from 1947. It literally states if the judges or the relevant individuals and clerks are not doing what they should be doing within the system, they can be held personally liable and sued within their own system by using this Act of Parliament. So it means the judges can be prosecuted. So if they're not going to rectify this shortly, we're going to start suing all the judges and the clerks. Now, I have
how will you
already,
do that? Will you do it from inside the system, from
well, we
their
can do it
system?
within this side of the system because it's their rules, and we'll just confirm within their own system that they're breaking the rules. So we'll do that. But we
Mhm.
can also get a settlement as we can get a case through the common law court as well to find them guilty through that. It's as if it goes to the people and you have a jury. But we can do it through the existing system as well because 100% we will win this because they
This is
cannot do.
interesting. It's a very
Yeah.
interesting situation, John, because it sounds like they accepted your paperwork, and I presume this is the paperwork where you kind of gave notice of the voiding of their court order. Is that
Yes.
what it is?
Yes.
So they accepted it, which means they accepted that their court orders were void
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
nullified.
They're just sitting doing nothing.
But then they said, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to take this further. We're not going to act on it. So if their court orders are nullified, yeah, they should act on it, right? They
Yes, they've
should
got it.
withdraw their court orders and
Yeah.
let people
Well, that,
go.
that's what the legislation states. But when we actually contact them, the judge wouldn't actually put his name or her name to the paperwork. It wouldn't respond. And I had to go through the clerk. So when I spoke to the clerk says, well, the judge has advised me that this is the position. I said, but the judge is not putting it in writing. They need to put their name in it and sign to say that this is their position. They won't do that because they're breaking the law. They won't put it in writing. The
I
judge
see.
won't even speak this. So the message comes through a clerk. So what we did is we said to the clerk, if this is not dealt with, as you're required to do this because of the legislation, you're required to set this decision aside. If you fail to do so, you're failing to comply with your existing rules and you're committing a crime against the people. This is applicable to the judge as well. You have no authority to do so. So we gave them a couple of days to do this. They didn't comply. So we sent back an email 2 days later. But this time we thanked them for the fact that they failed to comply, as it's established that they're breaking their own rules and committing crimes against the people. We will now give them a couple of other days to deal with it. However, this time we're copying in the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, the Justice Minister, and Boris Johnson. And we've informed them that if this is not dealt with within 2 days, we require each one of these officials, members of Parliament, to respond individually to ensure that this will be dealt with urgently. Now, after 2 days, they didn't get back to us. But what we also
None of
said,
them
no, well,
individually got back.
no, well, what we did actually say with on the paperwork, we said we accept the fact that this is your procedures and rules. You have to comply. The only way that you'd be exempt from complying with this is if you were of the opinion that you had superior authority to men and women, the common law court, the United Nations, and God. So we put that in and we turned around and said that to the MPs. As these individuals have confirmed they're failing to deal with their own rules, they're committing crimes with the people, and they have adopted the position, they've accepted the fact that they believe they're superior to the people, the common law court, the United Nations, and God. If you fail to do this as well, meaning the politicians, you will also be, was it the only way that you can do so is if you were to adopt a similar approach to these individuals, whereby you would also be confirming that you're superior to the people, to the common law court, the United Nations, and God. Now, they fail to comply with it, so effectively, we have a prime minister in this country who has admitted or he's confirmed that his belief is he's superior to the people. He's superior to the common law court. He's superior to the United Nations, and he's even superior to God.
That
So
he
that's what he's
stands
done.
above,
And we're paying
stands
his
above the
salary.
people and God
Yeah, yeah.
and the United
So,
Nations.
so what we're doing is getting the information out there. And what's going to happen now is many people in the public are all voiding their own orders and putting them in, because what they're doing is they're using criminal coercion against living men and women. And when they do that, it says they're punishing people, they're issuing orders which are fraudulent in committing crimes against the people. So people are rectifying this, and then when they rectify, we're bombarding them with information to hold them accountable. So this is the way it's working. So this is actually picking up now. We've put some information up on the site so people can actually do this, but it's only because you confirm your standing as a living man or a living woman that you can do this. Because if you don't do that, you are in their system and they take control. So we had a case, just to highlight to some of your viewers and listeners, we had a case 2 weeks ago. There was an individual who had been to court to see a friend. Now, when he went in, he was complaining about the security staff in the court, and he'd been a couple of times. And then when he went to this hearing, the security staff weren't going to allow people into the courtroom. And he says, look, I'm entitled to go in here. It's a public gallery. We're allowed to go in. So there was a bit of an argument. They went in. After the case, he came out. When he was coming out, there was an exchange of words. They weren't happy, but they left. Everything was okay. Now, what happened a couple of days later, he was then told that he's been prosecuted because the court security staff had said that they were threatened by this individual. So he's been charged with threatening and aggressive behaviour, which wasn't, but this is what they did to him.
Right, this is what they do
So,
to people. Yeah.
well, they summoned him to a court. So he went to a court, and it was obviously, it was 20 miles away. So he had to go to this other court out of the area. When he went in, they says to him, we need you to identify yourself as a legal fiction. So he said, no, I'm a living man. I'm not accepting the fiction. I'm not accepting that. That's not me. The judge says, I'm not interested. He says, you have to identify with this fiction. He said, no. So what had happened, he argued with them for a while, and they said, right, I'm going to adjourn the hearing. So he adjourned it for 2 weeks, and he said that when he came back 2 weeks later, he would not have a choice. The court were going to appoint a solicitor to act for him. So 2 weeks later, they come back. A solicitor turned up and says, I'll be representing you, in which case he says you won't. So he got rid of him. The judge wasn't happy, the magistrates, and then what happened is they made him wait a couple of hours, and then they pulled him into court. Now, when they pulled him in, they says to him, we need you to confirm that you are this individual, the legal fiction. He said no. Now, if you remember the story I told you earlier on about Roots, that's like the slave owner telling him, you
Yes.
will accept this new name. He says, no, I won't. Now, we didn't get whipped, but what happened is the judge says, well, you will identify with this. He says, no. So the magistrate got up and says, right, I'm now going to write, forget it. I find you in contempt of court, and you're going to be arrested and held in custody. So the magistrate got up to walk out, and then about 6 or 7 security staff came into the courtroom. They came up to him and says, you're coming with us. At which point he says, no, I'm not. So they jumped on him, and they actually beat him up in court. They were
Oh my
raining
God.
punches and him kicking him. He has 4 or 5 badly ruptured ribs. It wasn't broken, and they actually hurt him really badly in one of the eyes. He couldn't see out the eye. So one of his friends who was there phoned for the police. By this time, the security staff had taken him down to the cell, and the police arrived. They took him out of there and took him back to the police station and charged him with assault. And he was the one who was being assaulted.
Yeah.
But the police had seen how bad he was, and he needed hospital treatment. So they allowed him to go and released him on bail. The individual went to the hospital immediately, whereby they examined him and they confirmed that he's taken a hiding. His ribs are in a mess, and his eye socket is badly broken. Now, the socket is that bad, he'd blurred vision, and he could have lost his eyesight. His eye was swollen, so they couldn't do anything to it, but they checked him out on the various machines and scanners, and they've said, look, we're going to have to operate in your eye, because what they've done is they've actually, the eye socket, they've actually damaged that, and it's about to collapse. There was also, this is behind, there was a build-up of stuff behind the eyeball. It was causing pain as well, and it was swelling the eyeball itself. So they said, look, we'll have to wait till the swelling goes down. Now, last week on the Friday, he was actually in hospital for an operation on his eye. They cut him at the side of his eye, went in there, cut it open. They actually took the eye out of the socket. They then had to address the bone structure. They had to insert a metal plate, clean out the socket as a result of the damage, scrape it away, everything. They then put the eyeball back into the socket and closed them up, and they released them. Or they had to keep him in overnight, and then they released him the next day. So he's been released and went home. Now, if you come back to the one I covered earlier on with Roots, what they done to the slave, it says here, here's your name, you will accept it. He said no. He says, my name's Kunda Kinte. They said no. The owner says, you are Toby. No, he wouldn't accept it, so they beat him.
It's the
Now,
same thing.
in the UK, this
Hmm.
is what the judges are doing. So the judge says, you will accept this name. He says, no, I'm not. I'm a living man. He says, no, you will. And when you refuse to do it, the judge had him beaten up. They nearly
Right.
blinded him, had to undergo an operation. Now, this happens every day in courts in America, in the UK, everywhere, all over the world,
I
because the
was going to
system is
ask you
exactly
when
the
this
same.
happened, and then you kind of mentioned last
Yeah,
week. So I'm absolutely
last
shocked
week.
this just happened.
Yeah, it's just happened. And they're still trying to prosecute him because they say that he was threatening them. And he says when he turned up in court the other day, they're now charging him with assault. And the security staff came in and beat him up. He was trying to leave the court. But they're saying that it's unacceptable.
So
They were saying,
this is like indentured
yeah,
servitude or slavery.
yeah,
It's like you enter into the courtroom and
yeah.
you are being treated like a slave with no rights
What people,
whatsoever.
what I watched a television program. I don't get a lot of time to watch television, but there was a good program on over here in the UK. It was actually a documentary about Warren Buffett in America. He's obviously was the richest man in the world at one point. But
Hmm.
he was telling you some stories about his beliefs. Now, what he had actually said when he looked as a young child, he looked at the American Constitution and he said it was great. He says, so he looked at it and looked at the words, and it stated, all men are created equal. And he thought about it and looked at it. He says, hold on, that's not right. Effectively, what it should say is all men are created equal unless you're coloured.
Unless,
Because
pardon?
that's what, unless you're coloured or black.
Oh,
He
right.
said, because that was a case. Now, that was a case. Now, they've actually, America, like everywhere else, UK, everywhere's changed the system. So it's not applicable now, which is great news. However, what he did is he turned around and he said, well, that's fine, we've changed that. But what the people don't realise, the females, is the females are treated like second class
Oh,
citizens.
yes.
And this was going on. He says, so when the females actually realise that that's the case, how will they view it? Now, that's fine, but we'll go further, which he didn't cover. Effectively, we have a situation here whereby slavery is supposed to be abolished. It's never been abolished. They said it was unlawful, so they got rid of it, but they didn't. They legalized it with the fiction. And because they've legalized it with the fiction, they then created this scheme to deprive people of the knowledge and let them think that they're all free. So they says, you're no longer a slave, you are now a citizen within this community. You have privileges. Now, privileges, things like transport, moving, driving, as is traveling, you have that right anyway. It's an inherent birthright. You can travel. It's not a problem. It says you can't be. It says they don't give that. It's you, everyone's entitled to that from birth.
Well, they
But
deceived you about that as
yeah,
well and make you
yes,
get a driver's
yeah.
license.
Well, they do, but they say it's a privilege. So they're actually painting a picture to you saying you're privileged now because you're in our society. You can obtain this, but you pay the money for it. And not only that, you abide by their rules. And the rules are created to suit them and to generate money. But this is what they say, but it's all criminal. So what they're saying is you're not a slave now, but here you're now free, you're in the system. No, that's worse. You're still a slave, but it's through using the legal fiction, the title. That's criminal coercion. Every day in the courts throughout the world, when the judge goes in and they ask you for the name, they're asking you to identify with this fiction. If you identify with the fiction, you are in their system and they can use any rule to punish you. In David and Lynn's case, this is what they've done to them. They have said, right, you're David Noakes, you're Lynda Fire. They've turned around and says yes. So they then target them and say, right, we'll now punish you. So what we've done is says, no, that was done fraudulently. They're using criminal coercion. Unknowingly, David and Lynn didn't know what they're doing. They're now standing as a living man and woman, and as a living man and woman, they can now void this because the state have been committing crimes. So we've done that, and the state can't argue. They've got no defence. So we've now voided the order. So we're now trying to push forward with this. So in the next few weeks, we're hoping to get some sort of result by involving the politicians and holding them accountable.
Right. So you said the next step was to actually let the politicians know, and hundreds of people actually joining together to
Yeah.
send these letters that this
Well,
decision
yeah,
has been voided.
yes.
Yeah.
So I
And
think it's instead of having one case to fight, which obviously it doesn't, it's not applicable to everyone. It may not matter to everyone. He said,
mhm.
but basically what they're doing is they're trying to stay quiet. The government are staying quiet and say, look, we'll just let it go. But when they're actually facing with hundreds or thousands of these people voiding it, it's basically the people standing together and saying, no, you're committing crimes against us. We're voiding them and we want this put right. No, it's not just one, it's literally hundreds of thousands of people doing this at the same time. So it's holding them accountable and they have to put their house in order. If not, they will then be held accountable to the people.
Absolutely. Now, there was a hearing last week, was there not? And what happened at that hearing? I mean,
Well, as far as I'm aware, I says David hasn't, because he has no obligation to do so, but Davis hasn't had himself in. So David didn't go, but because the order was already voided, nobody had to go because the hearing shouldn't have taken place. Now, the void order, David had the extradition order voided, but the hearing last week was for the proceeds of crime. So that was completely different.
I
Now,
see.
what did happen initially when David was prosecuted? They got David into court and through the solicitors and speaking to them and obviously not allowing him to defend himself correctly, they managed to coerce him into entering a guilty plea. So he entered a guilty plea, subject to no action being taken against anyone else and a reduced sentence and all the rest of it. So they actually got this. So David went to prison and he spent some time in prison. He's now out on license, serving the remainder of his sentence. Now, because they prosecuted him, they now want to remove his assets. That's what the hearing was for last week.
I
But
see.
because that decision stood against them, they are entitled to remove his assets. But we've got back to them and says, well, look, they're not entitled to do that. So the original decision that was made against them to send them to jail, we have now also voided that. So we voided it
Excellent.
and
Yeah.
we sent it into the court last week, and it was only last week. We gave it to, we put it in, I put it into the clerk, the girl that was in the appropriate department, the clerk. She dealt with it immediately and passed on to the listings office. Now, the listings office is obviously, they deal with all the court business. It shouldn't have actually went there. But when I phoned up the court with the clerk to say, look, did it go to the right individual, meaning the judge? She says, no, I put it to the listing room. I said, no, it goes to the judge. So she apologised and said she would deal with it immediately, which she did. So it was passed on to the judge, Nicholas Lorraine Smith. He has the order. So I phoned up a couple of days later and says, right, is he now going to put this to the side and comply with the statutory requirements and put it right? She had turned and he said, well, no, he has that, but he's not passed an opinion. You'll probably wait till the hearing at the end of the week to speak to David. But of course, David never went, and I never went, and I told her that the hearing should be cancelled because we voided the decision. It's not open for dispute. It's actually a fact. We voided it, so therefore he can't proceed with this. So we want it dropped and we want this set aside. But he's refused to do so. So now we're away to hold him accountable and we'll have to notify the authorities. And if it's not dealt with quickly, we'll actually go and sue him within his own system. And we'll also take a case out in the common law courts against him as well. But Nicholas Lorraine Smith has already been prosecuted in a common law court and he's been found guilty already. Anyway, the
He
common law
has.
court has prosecuted 7 judges from 3 different countries, and we've also prosecuted the Lord Chief Justice in England, who's in charge of the court system in England. So they've all been prosecuted and found guilty. And in relation to the issue of 5G, the rollout in the UK, our former Prime Minister, Theresa May, she was actually summoned to a common law court and she was found guilty and prosecuted a couple of months ago for 5G for her
But
involvement.
but what's the end result? After you find them guilty, you prosecute them, you kind of let them know that, that
Well,
they're committing
yeah,
crime, and then they don't respond. They kind of pretend that nothing is happening. What's the end result? How can things proceed? You
well,
mentioned the term nullifying their authority. Is that along a general spectrum, or is it specific to this particular instance, this particular
no,
case?
well, no. It says basically if you stand, you can only stand either as a living man or woman, a living individual, living, breathing, or you stand as a fiction. Now, the
Hmm.
fiction is not a living being. The
Right,
fiction is effectively a piece of paper. It's their birth certificate. It's a
right.
corporation. It's a contract. So it doesn't exist. It's not factual. It's not real. So you either stand in one category or the other. Now,
Okay,
when you go to their court, if you stand under the legal name, so that would be your name with your title, in my case, Mr. John Smith. So therefore, if I stood under that, the legal fiction, I have to comply with their rules. If you stand out with that, and I stand as a living man, which is John Smith with no title, I don't have to accept their rules. So I stand out with it, and providing I stand there, they can't touch me. Now, that's where we remove ourselves and stand out with the system. Now, it doesn't mean that your daily life changes because people still pay. I can go out today and I will go to shops and I will pay money for goods and services. So when you pay, you're still paying taxes. You're still in the system. You still use a passport if you want to travel, you can use that. But you do so when you wish to do so. It's like having a winter coat. If you have a winter coat in the height of summer, you're not going to wear it, but you'll
right.
keep it and you will use it in the winter. So it's like having a legal fiction. If you wish to fly and you need a passport, you use the facility when you wish to do so. So you have
That's
a right
really
to choose.
interesting, John. So basically, we are in a situation where we can't avoid their passports, their
Oh,
driver's licenses. So we use them as we need, is what you're
yes,
saying.
you use it as you need, but when you use it, you do so with your consent. So you're consenting to it and you're saying, I will use this for this reason, but it doesn't allow them to prosecute you because once you actually claim ownership of the fiction, they can't prosecute you either. Now, the ownership of the fiction is quite unusual because this is what's not been done in the world. And this is what makes a difference. Within their system, if we go back to the buff, when my parents had a child, I was the eldest child, I was born. So my parents were told, you have to register your child's birth. But when they do so, if they don't, they're given a threatening letter and fined £1,000. You say, you must do this. But everyone does anyway. So they actually recorded my birth. When they recorded my birth, the state, the government, created a legal title, a legal entity, the fiction,
Right.
fictitious name, whatever you
The
want to
old
call it.
camp's name.
Now, when they create that, that's what they use every day of my life. So they use that. But what they do is they say, well, we're going to use that, but we need to make money on it. So therefore, we need someone to be responsible for this. So we're going to attach that to this individual, the child. And as I grow up, that's mine. I've been told it's mine. But this literally, now go back to their rules. This is why it's good. We use their system. According to their rules, if there's an agreement or if there's a connection and it involves more than one individual, one party, it's a contract. Now, in relation to the birth, your parents were involved, you were involved, and the state were involved. So you've got at least a minimum of four parties. So according to their rules, it's a contract. So that's fine. Strike one, it's a contract. Right.
Okay.
Next one. If we say it's a contract, for a contract, according to their rules, for a contract to be valid, there has to be various things. One of which is there has to be full disclosure, which means is everyone involved in the contract has to know exactly what's going on. My parents were never told about the legal fiction. I
Hmm.
was never told about the legal fiction. It's been withheld. So therefore, that means there's no full disclosure. So according to their rules, if there's no full disclosure, it's stating that the contract's void. Now, if the contract's void, it means that the use of the fiction by the state is fraudulent. So they're committing crimes against you and the
Right.
people. It's slavery. Now, what the common law court and the people have said is that this is not correct. They're committing fraud against us in crimes. However, does the legal fiction exist? Well, first of all, do you have a passport? Yes, it's on there. Do you have a driving license? Yes, it's on there. So the legal fiction exists and it makes your life easy. But should you be prosecuted for having the legal fiction? No. So therefore, the government are not allowed to use it because they were committing fraud. So they're not allowed to use it, but it still exists.
Mhm.
So therefore, who should the lawful and rightful owner be? Well, certainly it should be the individual who was given the birth name in the first place. So when you are born and you are given the birth name, if somebody has used that information fraudulently against you, and we've confirmed that, and they've set up this fiction, you should, as a rightful owner, be able to take it. But you can't just say, I'm taking it. What you have to say is, look, I exist as a living woman. Here's
Mhm.
my information. So you
Mhm.
exist and you have your certificate under common law. You've established your position, but now you're saying, well, hold on a minute, there is a legal fiction attached to me. It's been created fraudulently. I'm submitting an application for ownership. So you complete that on the common law court site, you submit your application, and you will get ownership of the legal fiction. So when you get ownership of the legal fiction, you then own it. That means unless you consent to contract with them or you allow them to use it, they can't use it against you. So when I went back to my case in court, I took these documents and I presented it as evidence against the judge. And the judge said to me, I'm going to prosecute you. I said, no, you're not, because I'm a living man. Here's my birth certificate. And he says, well, I'll continue anyway. He says, well, you're committing a crime. You can't do it. So I just sat there and let him do what he wanted. And then I also said, not only can you not prosecute me, but the only way you can deal with me is with the use of illegal fiction. However, here's my ownership paper. Because I have an ownership paper, I
Right.
own the legal fiction. And I did actually say to the judge and the prosecutor, I said, well, look, I've submitted my paperwork. The paperwork submitted is a lawful court order. It carries with it the authority of the people. So if you're going to challenge that, you have to challenge the people, which they won't do. Now, I have these documents which are established as facts in law, they're lawful documents. So therefore, here's my birth certificate. I'm a living man. As a living man, you can't deal with me because they can only deal with corporations. So I won that one. And I says,
Brilliant.
however, I have ownership of the fiction. Now, because I own the fiction and I'm aware that you may not have known that, although this has been established, I will allow you in this courtroom to challenge ownership of the fiction. You can do so, the judge, or the prosecutor can do so. He says, but if you wish to challenge that, the first thing you have to do to me is to tell me in this courtroom how the fiction was created. And the two of them just shut up because they can't tell you how it was created because it's a fraud against the people. So they shut and says
Because
nothing.
that's
And
the
I,
essential
yeah,
fraud
yeah,
against the
yes.
people, right?
So I turned around and says, well, not only, I says, I take it through your lack of response that you're not going to dispute this.
Mhm.
Because you're not disputing it, you're not rebutting it. I have established with the ownership papers that I am the lawful owner. I own the fiction, Mr. John Smith, and as a fact in law, this is established here in this courtroom. So therefore, that's it. You have no authority, no jurisdiction, and this must be dropped. They carried on for the rest of the day, about another 4 or 5 hours, and at the end of the day, they dropped the charge against me.
I know that's exactly what you had mentioned earlier. It's
Yeah,
absolutely incredible, but it's because of that second step that you had taken to
yeah,
own your name, to own the
yes,
all caps name, and that's a remedy that's actually
yeah,
permitted inside the system, right? You can
yes,
actually do that.
yeah.
Now, how exactly can people do that in the UK?
Well, they can do it everywhere. We have people in 88 countries using this. So the system is set up to provide a lawful remedy for an injustice. So it's applicable to everyone. Now we set up initially in Great Britain because we set up here, but it doesn't matter. You can use it everywhere.
Hmm.
However, by using this, the one thing you have to do is confirm that you exist as a living man or woman.
I
So when
see.
you go onto this site, there is an option that says getting started, and you can click on it, says register birth certificate. Now, there are certain terminology which will point out their system, the statutory system, uses words in the subject legalese. They use legalese and words, and they have different
Yes.
meanings, and the people don't know what the meanings are. It's their system. It's ridiculous. They have their own legal dictionaries with English words in them. But you look at them, well, if you have, say, the Oxford Dictionary in English, they cover all the words. You have the same words in a legal dictionary and they've got different meanings. They don't tell you what they mean, but this is the concept of legalese. This is what they use. Now, we don't have to accept what they say. So basically, if we use English day-to-day life, we use it. It's what we take it to mean, not what they mean, because we don't accept legalese. So when we say things like register your birth, it's just a term that's used because most people accept it. Okay, I'm going to register. The correct terminology means by registering something, you're signing away ownership. Not under common law, you're not, because basically all you're doing is making a declaration and you retain ownership at all times. This is of your personal information. Now, when you submit a declaration for your birth, you then confirm that you exist as a living man or woman. You're then given a generated number for your birth certificate, and that stays on the site. Now, there's a database on the site. It says you can type in your name and do a search, and it will come up with information. So once you go on there, and there's no charge for any of this, so once you go on there and you confirm you're on there, you now can use that in court because you've established you're a living man or woman. You don't go into court as one individual. If you go into court as one individual and say, I'm a living man and I'm a living woman, the judge will say, okay, fine, fair enough, well, so what, and carry on, because you're one individual. If you go into court and say, I'm a living man or woman, and here's my birth certificate, that has been provided with the authority of the people in the common law court. They can't challenge that because you have thousands of people behind you. They'll never take on the people. So
I
by
see.
getting the common law and confirming that you exist as a living man or woman, it's free of charge. You do that, you exist. Only when you've done that, you can then say, right, I now wish to apply for ownership of the fictitious name. So you then go into the fictitious name and you're required to put the fictitious name in, including the title. So that would be the one attached to yourself. You then put in the business address. Now, the business address is the address that the government have you at. So, for example, you will have a driving license and on it, it will have an address. That is the business address for the corporation. So you put that in and it then asks who's going to claim ownership. Well, you would claim ownership yourself. So if you claim ownership as a living woman, you then turn around and say, well, where do you stay? So you put your home address in. It may be the same as the business address. It doesn't matter. Put that in, sign off at the bottom, and basically sign off, type in your name electronically, click submit, and that's given authorization, and you then obtain ownership of the fiction. So that's it. When you
But
do these two things,
you're doing it through your site, right? Through the
yeah,
common law court site.
yeah.
Now, do they have a similar mechanism that you can do it
No,
on? Yes, they don't
no,
have. So,
no.
you know, in the US, there's a state here that does that, that offers remedy, the state of Minnesota. You can go on there and register your full caps name as your DBA. You're doing business as name.
Yes, yeah.
It's the same thing,
Well, that's
right?
something
Taking
similar.
ownership.
Yeah, something similar. Yeah.
But
But
it's
what
like
they
through
do,
their system. It's through the
yeah.
federal system.
Well, that's fine, but I'm not sure how they do. I need to check the ruling with it as well. There may be
Okay.
loopholes there, but basically, if they're doing that, you have to confirm that you exist as a living man or woman first. See,
Okay.
within our site as well, what we do is you can actually trade in business and you can operate business under common law. So therefore, what you do is you turn around and announce to the people that you're going to conduct business under common law. So you give your name and you identify yourself as the responsible individual for this corporation. And what you do is you then give a trading name to the common law court. So you register that with the common law court, and that then allows you to trade and operate business under common law
That's absolutely
instead of
brilliant.
under the
And
statutory system.
and you mentioned there are many countries now that are operating under the common law court. Are they using your website for that, or do they have
Yes,
other?
it's a one
Yeah.
website, just a one website. What we did is we started off initially, the first case was in Scotland. And when we done that, we set it up. We obviously, the requirement was, having spoken to everyone and came up with a consensus, once you convene a court, you have to publish the information. on the website, on somewhere, publish it and make it public. So what we did is say the best way to get the information out there or the court findings is just to create a website. So we set up the first website with 4 or 5 pages just to confirm what happened and what took place. As soon as we did that, we then got people contacting us from all over the UK saying, this is brilliant, can we use it as well? So everyone started using it. So we changed the name slightly. And then within doing that, about a month or so later, we're getting calls from everywhere, all over the world. People saying, this is great, can we use it as well? So we developed, but people are registering births from all over. We have 88 countries now, people have recorded births from. They have, I think next week, they are convening a common law court in Estonia. There is someone wanting to convene a court in the Republic of Ireland. And I think we have interested parties in Australia and New Zealand in the near future want to convene courts there. So using the system and the structure we have, it's all free. This is we use the system, you record information. It's just a system which allows people to operate under common law and to claim a lawful remedy to put
Yes,
things right. So
sounds
it's actually
absolutely
it's quite
brilliant.
good. Yeah,
An
it's quite
incredible
good.
way
But
forward.
this it's regardless of where you're based. It's not down to obviously skin color or obviously who you are or which country you're in. It's not down to race or religion.
Hmm.
Literally, we use the term common law now because we use common law. It's in the English-speaking countries. Most people associate common law with justice, so they say, right, we'll go back to common law. It's not common law. It's actually just natural law. So you can actually call it natural law, or you can call it universal law, or
Hmm.
law of the land. You could also call it God's law, or depending on your religion, it could be the Creator's law. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which race you are, which religion you believe in. It doesn't matter because
Hmm.
there's people as inherently good throughout the world. There's bad people as well, but it doesn't mean that because you're a bad person, you'll be targeted in a certain community. He says there's good and bad in everywhere. So this is actually for people who are conducting their business lawfully that requires protection. So they can use this system to do that. Now we've got people recording their bus from some weird countries. It's going to be very difficult for them to do what they're doing. But he says everyone's using this and wants to start doing it. Now you have a system that not only provides justice, but it can, if you roll this out, it can actually hold people in governments accountable for their own behaviour. Because if they're not doing what they should be doing, they always have to answer for the people. But the thing is, if someone commits a crime within the statutory system, what you'll normally find, if enough people complain about it, the individual will be removed, but they'll then receive a huge payoff and a pension for life. And yet the people that have suffered as a result get nothing, and they're rewarded for crimes against the people. So therefore, with the common law court, you pass it over to the people and they will be held accountable. Now, if you're in here, it doesn't matter who you are, everyone is accountable for their behaviour. You cannot cause harm, loss, or injury against anyone and not be held accountable for it. Now, that's what I'm saying. We use the name common law just to give a name, but in different countries throughout the world, I know in France, they don't like the term common law, which is fine. I'm not fussed on it either, but it's just a term. In France, they like the term universal law or natural law. Well, that's fine,
Okay.
but it's exactly the same thing. It's just depending on your belief or where you're located, you give it a different name, but it's all the same thing. The
Hmm.
basic principles of this system is cause no harm, cause no loss, cause no injury to anyone, and in your contractual dealings, ensure that you're honourable. And that's it. Anything else
That's
doesn't matter.
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah?
And you do not need to be bound to those statutory
No,
codes and regulations,
no,
which
no.
are all aimed at the legal fiction, the all caps name, and those adhesion contracts which you make unwittingly when you
Uh-huh.
accept that
Yeah.
name, when they ask you for it, right?
So we've used this very argument for David and Lynn, and this is what we're doing now. So we're getting people to assist within the UK by voiding their own decisions and also by contacting the politicians. And we're actually going to step up now, and the politicians will have to answer to the people. Because the point
Brilliant.
is, it's not as if what we're doing is unlawful. What we're doing is lawful. It complies with our system as well, and we have voided the decisions. So they cannot just ignore it because in doing so, they're committing crimes against not just David and Lynn, but they're committing crimes against the people, and they will be held accountable. So this is what we're trying to do now. Obviously, proceed, but even many people using this are in the process of getting papers in just now. So this is all going to be happening over the
Absolutely
next few weeks.
fabulous, John.
Yeah,
So maybe today it sounds like we could, continue this conversation for hours, but we should probably
yeah,
terminate
yeah.
it at this point because we've
Yeah.
been talking for a while. But perhaps we can leave, our viewers with some idea of how they can be involved. How can people step forward at this time to help David Noakes and Lynda Thayer because they are still in sort of dire straits within that system. Lynda is still in
Okay.
prison and
Yeah.
things are hanging over David's head like this, yeah, arrest warrant, extradition
What what
demands.
we'll say to people just now, there's people knock various things, and they obviously speak about what's right and wrong, and obviously how you do deal with things. The one thing that would actually help to assist everyone just now is by increasing the numbers that we have. Now we're actually putting things in just now with the people who are involved with the court just now. We've got thousands anyway, but the point is they're actually all putting in their paperwork to void these decisions. So that's ongoing. But many of your listeners will not have been involved with the common law court. But a simple thing that they can do to assist, and it'd be a great assistance, is just go onto the site and submit a declaration for the buff. So when they go onto the home page, on the right hand side where it says getting started, there's an option at the bottom, record your birth certificate. So if you go on there, you'll be required to record your birth, but you're also required to put in a password, and in doing so, you create an account. If you
Let
go
me
onto the
just
home
go to
page,
it right now. I'm just
yeah,
kind of going back where we were looking at that order. So let's go back to the main page,
just the home page. That's
the
it.
home
If you
page.
come down, scroll down here, just on your right hand side here, getting started. If you come down a little bit, at
Yes.
the bottom there, at the box, it says register your birth certificate. If you click on there,
Okay.
what will happen is you then fill out a form, but you can see here, it's just basic. You put in your birth name, your
Hmm.
email address. Now, when you give out your email address or phone number, that's only for contact purposes. It's not displayed on the site. You're then
Okay.
required to put in a password and confirm your password. Now that gives you an account. So what you can do is log in, and each time you log in, you put your password in. Underneath, you then put, obviously, it says whether you're male or female, the
Hmm.
place of birth, which just needs to be the city you were born in, the
Hmm.
date of birth, the time of birth, if you know it. Now, if you don't know the time, you cannot leave the field because it's required. So if you don't know the time, just enter not known. Your
Okay.
father's name and your father's date of birth, and then the address that your father stayed at when you were born. Now, if you don't know the address, but you know you were born, say, in London, just put London. Now, unfortunately, some people, if they've been adopted, may not know their father. He
Hmm.
says, so that's fine. If that is the case, just put it in the fields not known and leave it.
Okay.
All these people are doing and making a declaration. So you do the same for your mother's name, date of birth, the address where she stayed when you were born, and then at the bottom it says the name of the individual submitting the information. So as you're filling out the form, you type in your name as you would sign it off.
Oh, your own
And then,
name. Yeah.
yes, your own name because you're submitting the form, and then click
Hmm.
submit on the right, and that's it done. No
Okay.
charge, nothing. Now, if you come up, for example, if you come up onto, I'm not sure if you can do this, it's just out of picture from where I'm just now. If
Hmm.
you go over to the top on the right hand side, at the very top of the page, sorry, there's a search facility. It says right over on the right hand side at the top,
Yes.
search. If you click on there now, all the categories down you've seen just now, that's the categories that we record information.
Hmm.
So if you were to search for your birth name, you go into the very top certificate, click birth certificate search, and then
Yeah.
what would happen within 24 hours, there's an option to input your name. And then if you input your name and click submit, it will come up with your details, including your reference number. So that's showing you that you're on the system. Now, you can't get into the system just now here because
Oh,
this is
I
available
see.
once you've actually set up your account and you go in. There's no charge, so it's free of charge. And when you submit the information, we don't charge for any information. So there's no charge, and you can actually go into the search facility and confirm that your information is on the site, and you will get a birth reference number to confirm that you're recorded within the system. And that's it. Now, if your viewers were to go on and record their birth, doing that would offer them protection within the system. So they're protecting themselves. But in doing so, by recording the above, it's generating more numbers and it gives more weight and more power to the common law court, which makes it easier when we deal with the authorities because we have more people standing with us. Now,
And
you can use
you
this everywhere, all over the world.
and you said a primary aspect of this is that the system as we have it, the system of governments and corporations, they will not go against the common law court. They will not go
No,
against the people because the common law
well,
court
yeah,
represents the people,
well, the common law court is the people.
is the
The common
people.
law court is not a company, it's not run for money, it's not a corporation, it's not a charity. It
Hmm.
is only a process that exists for the people and it exists to provide a lawful remedy.
Hmm.
So if you are deprived of a lawful remedy within the statutory system, and you try to go to court and they won't allow you to go to court, or you get a sham case, or you don't get a hearing with a jury, or you're prosecuted for something unlawfully, he says to get a proper jury, when we convene a court, every court hearing we have is a jury of 12, and it's always the public. And the court officers we have are members of the public. Nobody gets paid for any of this. So it's the members of the public that are the common law court. I convened the first common law court because I required a lawful remedy. I wasn't the common law court. I'm not the common law court. I convened a case, but the common law court was the people that turned up. The people is the common law court. Now, when you do that, that's fine. So basically, once they put their names on, they're confirming their standing as a living man and living woman, and that's it. And that means that they're then allowed to rely on that, and they can be evidence with the entry on the common law court side. They can then defend themselves in the system. Now, the existing authorities cannot ever deal with living men and women because their system is structured so it can only deal with what they term a person. A person is a legal term. He said they deal with corporations. That's all they have the authority to deal with. We've already established and we know they can never obtain parity with a living man or living woman.
This
They're
is
always
absolutely
superior.
incredible,
Yeah.
mind-blowing information, and you do such an incredible job, John, of educating people and informing. You've broken it down in such simple terms that even I can understand it. So I hope viewers, really appreciate your extensive educative work over here. And so basically the question of this birth certificate, you said that it would help the situation currently with David Noakes and Lynda Thayer,
Well,
if more
yeah.
people went and registered their birth certificate here.
Well, what we have is David and Lynn are fighting a situation on their own. Well, they're not really because they're actually with the people, but they're
Hmm.
actually trying to fight in court on their own. But what we're doing is saying, look, we're not fighting as individuals, we're
Hmm.
fighting as people in the common law court. So we're standing together. Now, the more people that stand up and say, look, we support, we're part of this. In there is, if you look, I don't know if you can actually do this for your viewers, you should actually be able to get to this. If you look at the under the community heading just above
Hmm.
you,
Yeah.
you click on community. If you come down to the second option, declaration of the CLC, CLC is common law court. Now
Okay.
this was actually set up. Now if you come down slightly, click onto the green figure of the box, the icon, the logo. That's
Okay.
it. Now if you click on there, it should open up. Now you can get this without creating an account. It's just free anyway. So you click in. Now, this is a declaration for the common law court. It's the equivalent of your independence, American independence. So it's like the Magna Carta in this country as
Oh,
well.
I see.
It's a
Wow.
declaration for the common law court, but it's been summarized and it's a one-page document. So the page that you're coming to now, the second one,
Hmm.
uh, if you come down slightly, this is the declaration there for the common law court. So this explains what the common law court is, and what we've done is we've actually on the 3 pages after that we've got 100 signatures from the people. Now the 100 signatures is quite significant because in Scotland there was, similar to your Declaration of Independence and the obviously the Magna Carta, in Scotland there was a declaration of Arbroath. Now, the declaration at the time, it was 1314, it was basically the English were trying to come up and take over in Scotland. And the king at the time and the lords and the barons in Scotland decided to write to the Pope at the time. So they wrote to the Pope and says, look, we're having nothing to do with English. We don't want them in here. And they actually made a few statements that says every individual born in Scotland is born free. and
Wow.
we will never ever be under English rule. So
When did
they've
this
done that.
happen?
That was in 1314, right?
Oh,
So if you go
okay.
back to like William Wallace and was it that time Braveheart and things like that, Robert the Bruce. So they submitted this declaration to the Pope, and then the King in England had to accept it as well. So we have the UK government and we have the Church have accepted this document in Scotland. Now it's quite good because what it says effectively, if 100 men and women stand together in Scotland, it was for the declaration, is if 100 of us remain alive and stand together, we will never be brought under English rule. Now, we've taken the same thing by using that. We've said that as long as 100 people remain alive and stand together with the common law court, we will never ever be brought under statutory rule. And that's part of the declaration.
That's pretty
So this is
brilliant.
confirming our stance. Now, that's quite good, and it tells you basically what the governments are doing.
Hmm.
So that form's quite good. Uh, it's basically about assaults and injustices and things like that against the people. In fact,
Yes.
here down at the bottom, just here, the page here, the second paragraph from the bottom there,
Hmm.
borrowing from the declaration of our ancestors made in
Right.
Arbroath in 1320. We declare that as long as 100 of us remain alive, never will we, on any conditions, be brought under mandatory rule by legal statute. And it
But
goes on. It's
back
not.
in the day, wasn't, I mean, at some point, Scotland was subsumed under the United Kingdom, right? No?
Well, they've tried to. This is years ago, and what we've done is from 1707 there was an Act of Union, so Scotland is part of the UK, but Scotland still has its own parliament, it has its own judicial system, so we still are separate. Now the Scottish people keep saying, "Look, we are independent. We'll never be under English rule." Now,
Right.
what's happened is in even last year in Parliament because of this Brexit we had the Scots were going on about the English behaviour and saying, look, we don't want this, we're not happy. Now, the UK Parliament were trying to dictate what they would do and apply it to Scotland, but the Scots actually used this declaration from Arbroath and turned around and says, look, we are born free men and we will never ever be under your rule. And the English Parliament actually accepted, or the UK Parliament accepted that as a fact. And they keep saying when Scotsmen are born, they're born free and sovereign. So that's established. And it was established by the government, the Crown, and by the Church. So that's a fact. But what they don't actually tell you is everyone in the world is born sovereign. When you're
Yes, they
born, you're not
certainly don't
attached.
tell us
Yeah,
that.
no, you're born when you're born, you're not attached to anywhere. If you're over in America, it says within being born, you'll be told that you're then an American citizen. You'll get your birth certificate, you then get your privileges, and you're an American
Right,
citizen.
right. You're
But that's
quickly
because
drawn
they took
in.
you. Well,
Yeah.
you're also drawn into religion as well. Now,
Yes.
people have their own beliefs. This is so it doesn't matter, and they're all relevant. He says you can belong to any community you want as long as you're not being harmed, and you have a right to pick and choose where you do or where you stand. That's fine. But conveniently, the Scots stand around and say, look, we're born freedom. Well, we are. We're quite right. We are born sovereign and we're free. But so is everyone else. And that's the point.
Absolutely. And
And the crimes that are taken. Yeah,
I've spoken about this
because,
with other
yeah,
people because this notion of sovereign is under attack currently, with this over here, the demonizing of the term sovereign by attaching it to citizen and calling people
yeah,
sovereign citizens. But actually,
yes.
nobody's a sovereign citizen.
No, no.
So,
Basically, because of the crimes that's committed within the system, you now have something here that's set up to allow you to fight it. Because up until now, you found it very difficult to confirm that you were a living man or woman. Well, now we have a database. He says, not only that, when we have this, that has the approval of the common law court and the people. Now you'll see that there's a court seal on that. It was just down at the bottom of the page. It says common law courts. It was Great Britain, but it's also international. You can see the heading common law courts, Great Britain International.
oh, yes.
If there's documents that go off abroad and
Mhm.
someone requires a document, it's stamped common law court international. So obviously in America they would get an international document.
I see.
So obviously you wouldn't get the Great Britain version. That is for Great Britain. Anywhere abroad gets an international version.
Hmm.
And we also provide things like cards because some of the people find it difficult speaking to the authorities, and it's not something that we've come up with. It's something that people have said, look, if we deal with the authority, we want to confirm our position as a living man or woman. So we decided to come out with a card. So on the homepage, the homepage, you can see that we actually have ID cards, and it confirms that you're not only a living man or woman, but also that you own the fiction, and there's photographs on it as well. And we
Hmm.
have two versions. We've got the one for Great Britain, and we have one for international. These things are being accepted by governments as proof of ID. So they're accepting them as valid documents.
That's
So,
absolutely brilliant. And this
yeah.
particular document, before I click out of it, it's kind of a historic document at this
Yes,
point, right? You don't need to
yes.
update it. You don't need to add
No,
other people's
no,
signatures
no,
to it,
no.
etc.
What we did is because we wanted to prove that the figure of 100 is relevant, because within the state system in Scotland, I'd had friends who wanted to take on the courts. And what they
Right.
do, they knew if they can stand together as 100 men or women, as long as they have 100, they can take on Parliament or the government or the Crown, the Queen. You can
And
do
it's
that, the
only a
church, everyone
hundred.
accept it.
It's not
Yeah,
10,000
no,
or
no, it's 100.
100,000. Like, in the White
Yeah,
House, they've got all these
yeah,
rules. You've got to have
yes,
100,000 signatures
no,
before a
no.
petition will reach the president, things
Well,
like that.
the Declaration of Arbroath was done with 100, and it's accepted by the church, the crown, the government, the state. So we had 100. So what we've done is we have literally thousands. But normally, when you get a document signed, it's signed by dignitaries, the people in government at the time, or the king or the queen. Well, this is all the officials, the official side of it. The common law courts are people. But because we want to confirm that we do have more than 100, on behalf of the people, we took on a first come, first served basis. We just took 100 signatures. So we got 100 people to sign the document. So that
Brilliant.
is confirming that we have the 100, and we've got thousands of people stand with us.
Right. And now you're saying it actually helps to establish a greater sense of numbers, which is why you're inviting other
Yes,
people to step forward
yes,
and do the birth certificate
yeah,
registration and establish themselves as living men and women
yes.
through this
that
process.
that protects themselves within the system. But not only that, by doing that, it swells the numbers, and in swelling the numbers, it gives a better protection to themselves and also David and Lynn, because you have more people standing together, and as more people stand together, it's harder for the governments to deal with.
Brilliant. And
We're
they don't need
actually
to do
dealing with
anything more. They don't
no,
need to
no,
write letters to
no,
anybody.
nothing,
They don't
no,
need to.
no, if they wish to do so. Some people are not good at letter writing. Some people wish to do it in other ways. They can help any way they want. In the UK, if they speak to the politicians and complain about it and let them know about David and Lynn, that's fine. He says the one thing they can do is obviously record their birth. The more people who record that, the easier it is. And if people want to actively get involved, they can support what we do, because the common law court is not about an individual. The common law court's not an individual. The common law court is the people.
It's
So
the
the
people.
people decide how they're going to use this to obtain justice, and they work together. Now, with working together, if you have greater numbers, it becomes easier. But as
This
I
is
said, we've got thousands just now. This is we're starting off. It's only been going 2 years, but we're at the position when we can prosecute judges, we can prosecute previous prime ministers as well, and we can't do anything about it because what they're doing is criminal, and we're just exposing what they're doing.
This is absolutely brilliant. This really gives hope to everybody because so many people today are suffering under the
Yeah,
system and within
yeah.
the judicial system, and now in all the police state situations that we're living in around the world, so many people are being wrongfully persecuted and targeted, etc. So it's such a huge deal to learn that there is
If
remedy.
I if I give you one before I know we're pushed for time, but one just to let your viewers know, if you take ownership of, say, for example, you have a family of four, two parents, two children.
Mhm.
The parents record their births and they record their children. Now, because the children are under 16, it would have to be done by a parent. So they record the births for the children. Now, effectively, that means you have four individuals that are all living flesh and blood, and they're under the system. They're under common law, so to speak, and they are living men and women. Now, what you can also do is obtain the legal fictions for the four individuals. So the mother and father would claim their own ownership of their own fiction, right?
Mhm.
But they have two children. Now they have two children, but the state have a legal fiction for them. However, if you leave the fiction with the child, the state have it. But what you need to do is take ownership away from the state. So what the parents can do is the parents can claim the child's ownership of the fiction. So
Mm-hmm.
they can claim a child's ownership. Now, if it was a father that says, I'm going to claim ownership for both children, they can do it as an individual. Or if they wanted, they could do it as a couple and do it together as a partnership. So the two names, two parents can go on and claim the child's fiction. Now, this is an interesting one. Within, we know that the system, how they operate with the unlawful removal of children from homes,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
If they obtain a court order to remove a child from home, when they obtain it against the legal fiction.
Right.
But say the parent has claimed the legal fiction. If the parent has claimed the legal fiction is not attached to the child. That means they can't take the child
This is
because the child
huge.
stands under common law. Yeah.
This is huge. I think every parent of a young child,
Yeah.
particularly children, in danger of being snatched by the
Yeah.
child protection
Yeah.
system, need to know this,
Yeah,
need to hear
well, this is
this.
what we're doing as well, but we're a way to help and assist with various mothers. Now, there are certain circumstances. This is all about lawful. I would actually say, if anything, that this is actually probably superior to what they have in their system because this is done in honour and obviously with men and women and it's lawful. So we make sure that everyone has to act honourably and lawfully. So
Hmm.
there's a higher standard living under
Yes.
common law than the state. Now, if you live honourably, that's fine. What you have to remember is many children do suffer. Now, we know not always is it essential to keep children at home. For example, there may be difficulties at home for one reason or another, and a child might be better being removed anyway. That's not the issue. And the issue is not removing the child either. The issue that we're dealing with is the unlawful kidnapping by the state. It's unlawful. And because it's unlawful, that should be stopped. So we stop that. Now, what you then do with the child is then decide what's best for the child. And if necessary, a common law court of men and women can then decide what to do with the child. But effectively, children should not be removed from parents by the
Hmm.
state. Obviously, he says for their own use and for money and for abuse. He says so this system will shut it down because even within their own rules, if the legal fiction is not attached to the child, because they have the fiction, the court paper says remove this child and they give the name. That's a fiction. If the fiction is not attached to the child, they can't take the child. And if they
This
do
is
take the
huge. This
child, it's
has to be
kidnapping.
shouted from the rooftops, John. Everybody
Yeah.
needs to know this. I'll do my best to do what I can to promote this podcast and put this information out in an article. It's going to take a little time, but I'll put it out eventually over the next couple of weeks. But this information that you're bringing forward is so major. Parents suffering under the foster care system, losing their children, mothers whose babies have been ripped from them very wrongfully, need to know
David,
this.
David and Lynn are being prosecuted because of pharmaceutical companies and because of
Yeah.
big money, big pharma. They're doing that because big pharma dictate what will happen to people when they're ill. They'll dictate how they want them treated and they'll make money from it.
Hmm.
Effectively, they're criminals. He says now, when someone comes up with any sort of possible cure that can assist in things with like GC math that can assist, it's down to people individually to turn around and say, look, will I use this or will I not? He says, so they have the right to choose and they should not be restricted. Now, the point is, David's companies just now, the companies he has, are now both registered under common law, which means its statutory system can't touch them. So effectively, David can actually start producing this under common law. They can't touch him.
Fabulous.
The
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals company can't touch him either. So the
Mhm.
point is, this is done lawfully and it gives people back the choice and obviously gives them back the justice system and the authority that they should have instead of leaving it with the corporations. So the system here is quite good. Now, we're not asking to turn around and saying, look, we want to use this and we're going to replace the whole statutory system. No, that's wrong. You don't do that. We have a system. If it's running properly, it's fine. There's not a problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Unfortunately, the problem we have is everyone's corrupt and they're
Yeah.
lining their own pockets and the people are suffering. Now, if that's the case, until such time as this is resolved and put right, we need to deal with it. So therefore, with the authority of the people in the common law court, we can do that. And we can put it, so this is acting like a sort of big brother type thing. We're keeping an eye on the state system and
Hmm.
saying, well, if you don't run it properly, you'll answer to the people. So the people take authority back.
Absolutely stellar. This is so incredible. It's so hopeful and hope giving to everybody because people now have an option. They do not have to suffer inside the statutory system, which is acting against them, acting criminally against them in many cases. They have recourse now to remedy through the common law system. And it's a way of keeping the statutory system in check, it sounds like, and keeping them on track. So, absolutely brilliant. John, I would be so happy if you came back and talked further about this, but I think today you've done a marvelous job giving everybody not just an update about what's going on, but a real insight into the common law system, the common law court, and how people can begin to free themselves by just understanding the process and beginning to take back that name, take back ownership of that name. So, so, so thank you so much for being here this morning. I can't, have you muted by any chance? I can't hear you.
No, no, it's okay.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I was just listening to you. No, well, thanks for giving the opportunity to come on anyway, because we're doing a lot to help David and Lynn. We're hoping that we'll get some sort of result in the near future. And we have a lot going on just now. There's people within the Common Law Court all working together for this end result. So I think it'll certainly cause a lot of problems, because if they're refusing to deal with this, it's going to expose the whole system, including the own government and the Prime Minister as well.
I think
So they're
that's what's
going to have to
happening right
decide.
now with all
Yeah.
these cases, right? Because
Yeah.
they're grabbing whistleblowers and sticking them in mental health wards and in jail. So obviously, well, they're hoping people like me don't come forward and cover it, right? So this is spoken about.
Well, when they do that within their own court, they now can't do that either. Because if they then challenge someone and want to put them in a mental ward, they cannot do that until they can establish that they have authority and jurisdiction, which they can't, because we have a common law court order confirming that they have no authority and jurisdiction.
Oh,
So they
I'm
can't do
so
that
glad
either.
to hear it. It's like absolute joy to the ears to hear that they can do it. And I'm hopeful, very hopeful, after hearing everything that you've said, that all the other whistleblowers who are currently incarcerated and being held in mental health wards, they can indeed be rescued through this remedy. I hope, that this can be applied in their cases. So thank you again, John. We'll look into these matters again as the days go by, and we thank everybody for listening. Stay tuned for more information on this subject, and we'll be back again very soon. Thank you again, and have a great morning or afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.